You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button.
Looking at signing day as the dust now settles, right as we were going off the air yesterday, the book closed on the early signing period for LSU. And that was when Derek Meadows flipped his commitment from the Tigers to Alabama, a move that was expected for a very, very long time. But that officially closed the book on the early signing period for LSU. So when you look back now, after the whirlwind that it was, not just Wednesday, but really starting 2 weeks leading up to signing day with the Bryce Underwood decommitment and flip, you had the Devin Harper decommitment and flip, Cade Phillips, Mike Tyler, and then Derek Meadows on signing day, everything that led up to it. Look back at the whole class, and what do you see? Well, Brian Kelly told you what he saw yesterday when he met with the media, and man, according to him, it's his best one yet. It's 28, sorry, not 28, 36.
I think overall, this is the finest class that I have signed. I think it points to the work that the entire staff has done over the past 18 months in putting together an outstanding class. And regardless of what happened over the last week, all these guys wanted to be here at LSU.
It's a mouthful. Finest class I've ever signed is what Brian Kelly says. And when you take the step back and you look at it from the 4,000, 5,000 foot view, the evidence does certainly support that. It's easy to get caught up in the flips. It's easy to get caught up in all the bad that happens with recruiting. That's why everyone always says there's no melt quite like recruiting melt. And I firmly believe that. And it's also easy in that same vein that when the dust settles and you look at the class, you can really paint with a colorful brush, right? You can pump a little sunshine and, oh, you got the guys who wanted to be here. You know, you don't want the guys who do. You got the guys who want to play for LSU. Those are the two angles you can take at this. But when I think if you really sit back and you look at LSU's 2025 class, you'll find this, that it's definitely the best class Brian Kelly's had in his time at LSU. That's not even debatable. If you go back a little deeper in his time as a head coach, yeah, it would be the best class that he's had. And here's the context kind of behind that. 2 days, literally 2 days before Bryce Underwood flipped to Michigan, I did a whole episode on LSU Daily. Subscribe, by the way, if you haven't already, wherever you get your podcasts, about the class being bigger than one player. It was off of this. What jump-started me on that was an article written by John Talty about, is Bryce Underwood the only thing that can save Brian Kelly? It was a foolish take, and, clearly that's played out. But my whole take there was it's the class is bigger than one. It's not Bryce Underwood that's so important. It's the 2025 class. 2 days before he flipped, that was the take. You go back and find the episode. Now looking at it on the Thursday after the early signing date, I don't think that could be any more true. LSU, what made this class so great is the depth, and not just the depth, the quality of depth that they were able to secure, the needs that they filled, a lot of it on defense. The bulk of the class is on defense. 14 players on the defensive side of the ball. You look at the groups of signees, the position groups, I should say, that are most impactful in this class: linebacker, defensive line, offensive line, and then your secondary. You got better at every single level. Like, you reloaded every single level and kept building depth on the defense, which has been your weakness the last 2 seasons. That's a check mark. And you did it with elite talent like DJ Pickett, like Aiden Anding at cornerback, Jaden Breaker, Charles Ross at linebacker, who Brian Kelly raved about those two. And we're going to come back to linebacker a little bit more. And then look at the litany of guys that Bo Davis brought in on the defensive line. Defensive tackle was looked upon as a weakness. that's turning into one hell of a strength for LSU going forward. So when you look at it from a quality depth standpoint, and I have a little bit more on that, but just the needs you filled, huge. You signed the two top 5 interior offensive linemen in the country on Wednesday. And that doesn't even factor in Tyler Miller into that as well. And I think we're all in agreement, you needed offensive linemen, right? I mean, you're replacing most likely 4 out of the 5. Where they were deficient, they filled, and they filled with elite talent. The other thing I will say about the quality of the depth is this. When talking about recruiting, you always hear about the blue chip percentage, the blue chip ratio, right? That's thrown around a lot, and I get it. There are strikes and gutters in recruiting. Even the biggest of 5 stars, they don't always pan out. That's just the nature of it. But that's the grading system that you have. And I think it's easy to look at LSU's class and say, well, they were top 5 the whole cycle, and now they finished the early signing period at 8. What happened? In that same vein, you could look at it and say LSU went into signing day with 2 5-stars. They left with 3. That's pretty good. I would encourage you, if you're looking at the ranking, to not. Because that doesn't illustrate the quality of depth like something like the blue chip percentage. On 3, they assign a percentage of blue chips to everybody's class. LSU's is 83%. They're telling you 83% of LSU's class should be a blue chip caliber athlete, somebody who is near or at the top of their position, respectively, in their sport, seen as, again, I hate using it, but quote unquote can't miss. There is no such thing as a can't miss, but that's what these types of players are seen as. They're telling you LSU's class is 83%. That puts you in the company of the top 5 in the nation. Alabama's, it's in the 80s. Georgia's, it's in the 80s. Now, Oregon's is 90%. Boy, Phil Knight really, he's really handing out those blank checks up there in Eugene, ain't he? But that puts you in that company. Y'all, Texas was the number 1 ranked class. LSU's blue chip percentage is better. Texas is 77%. It's better than Ohio State's, who's in the top 5. So you're in that company, and in some cases, better. The quality and the depth is what made this class so special, not one player. Would you have loved to have Bryce Underwood? Absolutely. The guy could be a generational talent. Could be. Do you want Jakeem Stewart? Sure. In-state guy, number 1 player in the state of Louisiana. You'll always want that guy on your team if you're LSU. Would Cade Phillips have been nice? Absolutely. But instead of signing a top 5 cornerback, you signed the number 1 cornerback, and then the number 1 cornerback in Louisiana. We already went through the offensive line, the linebackers, and all of that. The quality of depth there is fantastic. And Brian Kelly, you can expect a lot of these guys to come in and contribute early. Brian Kelly went through a few of them on Wednesday. He was asked, which of these guys can come play immediately?
Well, I mentioned Trey'Dez Kern. I mean, I felt like physically he might be one of the strongest players that I've recruited at the position in a long time. He has that kind of physical characteristics. I would say Zion Williams is big and physical, a guy that you could plug in immediately. Those are big physical guys. Just because of his length, DJ Pickett and his pedigree is a guy that could come in right away. Bordelon is physically as strong as some of the offensive linemen we have. Those are guys physically that can do it. Now, who are the guys that can make the transition that have the physical tools to do it? Now you're talking about Harlan Berry, right? You're talking about Philip Wright. You're talking about skill guys. Can they make that flip and transition? Because they certainly have the skill to do it. But the big physical guys, I would lean on Kern, Bordelon, Zion Williams. Those are guys that physically are ready.
That's a lot of guys that he went through. And at important position. The first name out of his mouth, Trey'Dez Kern. It's an interior offensive lineman. Solomon Thomas fits in that too. You're replacing both guards. You have Cohen Eccles, who they're really high on, but don't be surprised if you have a freshman. You could go in the portal, of course. Don't be surprised if you have a freshman starting at one of those guard spots immediately out of this class, making you better. Harlan Berry, what a great change of pace he could be for Caden Durham. And oh, by the way, JT Lindsey's there too. But Harlan Berry, everyone's looked at him and said he can play day one. Same with Pickett. You already mentioned Zion Williams. Again, that's potentially on the interior of your defensive line. He could play that big in spot like Savion Jones did, but I liken him even more to Paris Shand. But that's someone day one, all at positions of need. You're going to see the impact of this class early and often for LSU. And it's building on the class you saw last year, which, by the way, had a blue chip percentage of 66%. And look how many of those guys played this year out of necessity, got valuable reps, and performed well and developed as the season went along. Now you're handing this coaching staff this class. It's easy to look at it and say, okay, it can work. You still have holes to fill in the portal, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show. Areas that LSU has to focus on, their top priorities in the transfer portal. That's going to be at the top of the 5 o'clock hour, so we'll be back here for that. But overall, the 10,000-foot view of this class, job well done, mission accomplished. You lost some guys, and that stinks. But you kept the majority of this group together, and they are the next step in building this program back into a national championship contender.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.